Coming up this week on Breaking Badness, today we discuss Morphing Meerkat Manor. A newly discovered phishing-as-a-service operation researchers are calling Morphing Meerkat has been using the DNS-over-HTTPS (DOH) protocol to evade detection. Next up, Bulletproof host with the most. The Domain Tools investigation teams analyzes Proton66, a bulletproof hosting network enabling cybercrime operations, serving as a hub for aspiring cybercriminals. Focuses on the threat actor Coquettte, and that's Coquettte with 3 T's, and their ties to the Horrid Hacking group, a loosely organized cybercriminal collective fostering amateur threat actors. And of course, we'll end with our game, Golden Guidance, no grievances, as there are too many grievances in the world right now. Breaking Badness is next. Welcome to Breaking Badness, episode number 204, recorded on April 7th, 2025. I'm your co-host, Callie, Morphing Meerkat's Pajamas Fensel, and with me is co-host Tim. Dope! I encrypted that DNS helmet. And last but not least, Ian Dorknet Campbell. Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Happy April.
Happy April. I can't believe we're already in April. That's crazy.
Indeed. But notice the blue skies behind me. April's great.
April's great.
I'm just going to try not to get hit by any planes during this recording.
You're going to reenact North by Northwest.
That's right. Oh, such a great call out. What a great movie.
And then Ian's coming to us from an undisclosed location.
That happens to be my office. It's blurred more due to the fact that everything is everywhere right now. But yeah, just my usual office.
I have
Your undisclosed location. We like that.
Similar thing going on over here. It's blurred so you can't see how messy it is and judge me for it.
Mine's the messiest of all. That's why I have this virtual background going.
One day we'll get it right.
I like my piles of stuff. What can I say?
They make sense to me. My piles make sense. Maybe we should talk about some InfoSec. What do we think?
Let's talk about some InfoSec.
Awesome.
There's a lot of piles there too.
Yeah, there are.
The first article we're going to talk about is actually a request from the audience because we take requests. But this one comes from perennial guest of the podcast, Alan Liska, sent me a note. Can you talk about this? I'm like, sure, we can talk about that, Alan. We can do that for you. And I'd like to extend that invitation to anybody.
To be clear, most of the requests are for Freebird. There's only so much we can do with those requests.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And there's only so much Freebird we can play without getting
DRM.
Yeah. We're going to talk about what I've decided to name Morphing Meerkat Manor. I don't know if people remember that show from Animal Planet, Meerkat Manor, but a newly discovered phishing-as-a-service operation. Researchers are calling Morphing Meerkat. I like the alliteration, but they've been using the DNS-over-HTTPS protocol to evade detection. So I guess, Tim, before we get too far into Morphing Meerkat, what is phishing-as-a-service, or FAS? As the acronym.
I know everything is an ass. Wait, that I probably shouldn't say that, except that AS shows up after ever more letters for ever more things. So phishing as a service isn't necessarily a professional services outfit that you call up and ask them to do your phishing for you, but it's self-service. It is one of the many ways in which cyber criminal activity and various breaches of security have been democratized and made possible for much less technically skilled actors. And so you don't have to have a lot of technical knowledge if you know where to go to get a hold of some of these items like these phishing kits. And Morphing Meerkat is a great example of that. So all the heavy lifting as far as technical aspects of it have been done for you, and you pay the sellers of it some money, and then you sit back and reap the rewards of the phishing that goes out. And I didn't see anything in this article about how much financial ill-gotten gain can be attributed to this particular service, but it does seem to be fairly widespread. So we can assume there is some.
When you said it's democratized, it makes it sound like it's a good thing. But
I know. Yeah, sadly. Oh, spread it like wildfire. How about that? Wildfire's a bad thing.
I like to imagine that behind the scenes, the threat actors are like, there's got to be a better way. We'll make it as a service.
I'm sure that's true. And
Let's
we've
just
talked
do
before.
it and be legends.
Yeah, we did a story a few weeks ago about something that sort of actually preyed on script kiddies, but script kiddies, or folks who know a little bit of scripting and then flex their elite hacksaw skills based on that, really can get into the game with some of these as a service and kits that make a lot of this pretty trivial to do, especially for somebody that doesn't have much else to do besides figure out how to steal some credentials through phishing.
I don't know where they find the time. I'm too busy for crime myself, but so
That's because you're a good person, Callie.
thank you.
Although you'd make an excellent criminal mastermind, because suspicion would not head your way for quite a long time. For probably two-thirds to three-quarters of the movie, no suspicion would be on you.
I accept that. I accept that role. So, Tim, what makes Morphing Meerkat, what makes this operation for phishing as a service more unique compared to other phishing campaigns?
Yeah, so there are two ways in which DNS plays a role here with this one. One of them is, as we're going to talk about, DNS-over-HTTPS, and that is something that's certainly not limited to phishing campaigns or this phishing campaign or necessarily illegitimate activity at all. But then there is the fact that DNS-MX or mail exchanger records play a role in this as well. So we can talk a little bit about what Morphing Meerkat does. Basically, it starts off with a big spam campaign, which then is going to net a certain number of recipients that will fall for the lure. And when they click the link in the lure, there's a couple things that happen. One of them does have to do with this lookup to their MX records. And the reason that's important is that it then allows the phish kit to present them with a login page that's based on the email provider that they use. So that means it makes it a little bit less likely that they're going to catch on to the fact that there's something fishy. Don't forgive the pun. It's appropriate here, or do forgive it, I guess. That pops up a interstitial screen in which they enter their credentials. And one of the tactics here is that it actually gives them a incorrect password notice. And so it wants them, the point of that is to get them to enter their stuff twice just to make sure that the actors don't accidentally get bad credentials. It then forwards them, as so often happens with these illegitimate phishing URLs, it does forward them to the real login page of the bank or whoever it was that they decided to impersonate in this campaign. And meanwhile, the stolen credentials get passed on to the phisher in a couple of different ways. They can be emailed, or they can actually use a webhook bot to send it to a Telegram channel. So that's the outline more or less of the attack. Part of the way that the spam emails with the malicious URLs are able to work is through leveraging open redirects, which is something that's been leveraged forever, where you think you're visiting one site, but because of the crafted URL parameters and because the site that you think you're going to is compromised and therefore has a vulnerability to open redirects, you then get redirected, sometimes through multiple steps, to the actor-held infrastructure, and that's where you get the phony login page and so on and so forth. Yeah, so the DNS over HTTPS piece of this, that's part of the obfuscation, really. So there are several different things that the coders of Morphing Meerkat have done to make it a little harder for analysts to discover that this malware is at work. And one part of it is that they make a lookup to get the MX records corresponding to the victim, and that's how they are able to then, it automatically selects the right email interstitial to put up in front of them so that they think, oh yeah, I use Outlook and here's an Outlook thing that popped up, therefore my suspicions are not aroused. Or I use America Online or whatever it is that I use, CompuServe for my email provider. And the lookups to get those MX records would ordinarily be done via a plain text port 53 DNS lookup. But in this case, it uses DNS over HTTPS, which means that from a network traffic inspection perspective, it just looks like another port 443 encrypted lookup to an IP address, which happens by the bajillions in any large organization and even any small organization, really. And so it lets that traffic blend in with the multitudes of other traffic flows that are present there. And because it's encrypted, of course, you can't peek inside and find out what they were really doing, which was an MX DNS lookup, which itself is not necessarily a big attention grabber, but it is something that when it's in plain text, as it is normally, is something that an analyst can spot and potentially take into the analytical process.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say that obfuscation part is the biggest challenge for traditional DNS filters in monitoring DOH? Or do we call it DOH?
I'm happy to call it DOH because that's how I feel about it. Yeah, so the deal here is, and not surprisingly, since we are a podcast brought to you by the good folks at Domain Tools, we think about DNS a lot, and so does Infoblox, who did the great research here that this article is based on. DNS is, as I like to often say, forensic gold. If you can't know what kind of resources are being accessed by the devices in your network, then that puts you at a significant disadvantage when it comes to using network traffic to start to get insights into what's actually going on if you suspect or if you know that there's been some kind of incursion. So if those DNS lookups happen over HTTPS, as I said, then they become opaque to the analysts that are trying to understand what's going on. And when you see traffic going to all kinds of different IP addresses, which you will if you're looking at edge network traffic for any kind of organization, if you don't know what domains are being looked up, then you could have a lot of time on your hands trying to suss out this IP address has 48 domains on it. How do I know which one this machine in my environment was trying to access? When you have regular DNS, you're able to narrow that down. And so it helps tremendously in the analytical process. Yeah, so DNS over HTTPS is not great from a security practitioner's perspective.
How would you say the rise of phishing-as-a-service platforms has changed the threat landscape in cybersecurity? Obviously, we're not teaching a man to fish anymore.
Yeah, no, that's right. We're not really. We're teaching them to go buy a fish kit with someone else's purloined money. I think it has raised the amount, just the volume of phishing that's out there. It doesn't necessarily, fish kits that are meant to be very user-friendly and sort of entry level are not necessarily going to be the most sophisticated. And Morphing Meerkat has some sophisticated aspects to it and obfuscation techniques, but it's not outrageously, this is not state-sponsored level tradecraft stuff here. It's just a little bit harder to analyze than maybe some of the stuff that came before it. So the rise of phishing kits just means the volume of phishing is higher than it was before. And that not only because more people are doing it, but because the kits tend to make it easier to do a spray and pray large-scale campaign.
So what best practices should organizations implement to defend against these types of phishing campaigns?
Yeah, for defending against phishing campaigns, it's the same kind of advice that we've had for forever. As far as, I'm still a big believer in user education. There's a debate about that. Sometimes, is it hopeless? Is it a Sisyphean task? Yeah, I'm sure it feels like that because people still click on stuff. But you got to do that. You've got to have sensible security rules in place and so forth, and just a good overall security practice within your organization, and running reasonably current security tools like EDR tools, EDR, XDR, et cetera, and good edge protection. All of those things will help. They all play a role. None of them is a silver bullet by itself, but they all help with that. But as a related thing, be aware as a practitioner of whether DNS over HTTPS is becoming more present on your network. And you can't, like I say, it's hard to inspect that traffic, but what you can do is understand, for example, if you deploy a standard corporate image to your devices, some operating systems will tend to gravitate toward DOH. If you control your own DNS resolvers and DNS infrastructure, that's the best way to go, because then you still have that forensic capability, or in fact, if you're using a technology like RPZ, even using your DNS resolver as a point of enforcement protection. So hang on to that old-fashioned DNS. It's really your friend as a security practitioner.
And what's old-fashioned comes back in style too. So
that's true.
So there's that. Awesome. Thanks, Tim, for walking us through that. We really appreciate it. This brings us to the part where we assign a hoodie rating to this article. So if you're a newer listener to the podcast, first of all, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. But after we talk about the news, we like to assign a hoodie rating from 1 to 10. 10 is absolutely catastrophic. There's no coming back from this probably. And then 1 is, that's not so bad. You can go about your day and everything's fine. Just something more to be aware of. So since we just heard from Tim, I'll start with Ian. What would you say would be the hoodie rating from your perspective on this article?
I'm going to go middle of the road and just go 5 out of 10. Some of these techniques are pretty standard. Some of them are advanced, but they're all pretty effective. I just wish more than half of the DNS experts in the world had foreseen the whole DOH becoming a command and control thing. Oh, wait, they did. All right. Anyway, 5 out of 10 for Morphing Meerkat, 9 out of 10 for Infoblox for this research. They continue to put out good stuff.
10 out of 10 for the name.
Yep. Absolutely. Honestly, it gave me mental images of meerkats running back and forth with packets, like the IP over avian carrier RFC, just the meerkats running back and forth as a network infrastructure.
It's the next Pixar movie.
I didn't look up this year's April 1st RFC myself. Did either of you look it up?
I did not. I would be surprised if someone had the energy to do an April 1st RFC this year.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We're just so tired, but not so tired that, Tim, you can't do your hoodie rating.
No, that's true. I can do my hoodie rating. I'm going to go just a little bit lower and call this a 4, only because I think ultimately none of the interesting stuff that we just talked about that's part of this campaign goes anywhere if the victim doesn't click on the malicious link. The things that scare me the most are the 0-click attacks where you literally can either just open an email, or I believe I even saw something, it might have just been a proof of concept where simply scrolling by the email, something popped and happened silently in the background. But certainly the no-click ones are scarier, and there's not evidence that's specifically part of this phishing kit. So if you are, put it this way, if your users are falling for other kinds of phishing lures, they can get bitten by those just as much as they can get bitten by this one. This one is interesting from some of the technical aspects of how it works, but from the standpoint of starting that whole chain where the user clicks on the thing, I don't know that it's necessarily more dangerous than other phishing campaigns that we've seen out there. That said, your regular reminder that phishing still outpaces ransomware and other kinds of attacks in terms of the total losses. So it's a big deal, and it's something everybody should be paying attention to for sure.
Hey, Tim, that brings to mind an old memory. You want to know the worst 0-click exploit I ever saw?
I do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I saw it personally, and it amazed me. I did nothing on my iPhone, nothing whatsoever, no interaction, and suddenly a U2 album appeared.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah, you did do an action. You bought an iPhone. That was the fatal mistake in terms of that one. Yes, I remember that. Yeah, I don't think that's still on my phone, but it was there for a really long time.
Did you?
I don't even remember if you removed it, if it would just come back again or not. But it really soured me toward U2 a little bit, which is too bad. They're a great band, but that wasn't cool.
Not cool, man. I got to opt in.
Exactly.
Thank you, Tim, for analyzing that article for us. And thank you, Ian, for supplying your hoodie rating. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to talk about Bulletproof Host with the Most. So stay tuned. And we're back. How was the break, everybody?
Dodged a couple 747s out here.
Yeah, you got to watch your head there. I still haven't tidied up my space, so that's why I will refrain from
de-blurring.
Yeah,
my clutter piles are in the witness protection program.
Yeah, at some point I'm going to clean up and then I'll be like, I will pretend like it's this clean all the time. So welcome to my space. But today is not that day. I am not.
And then I'll be able to find nothing after I clean up.
Exactly. But no, I am not the hostess with the mostest, but we are going to talk about a bulletproof host with the most. The Domain Tools Investigations team analyzed Proton66, which is a bulletproof hosting network enabling cybercrime operations and serving as a hub for aspiring cybercriminals. I feel like there's a pattern here between the first article and this one. It's all about path of least resistance for cybercriminals, but this work focuses on a threat actor known as Coquettte, and that is Coquettte with 3 T's. It's not excessive at all. And their ties to the Horrid Hacking group, which is a loosely organized cybercriminal collective and that fostering amateur threat actors. So there's a lot to unpack there. Ian, first and foremost, what is bulletproof hosting for folks that might not know?
Proof hosting providers or web hosts that ignore abuse complaints, they ignore takedown requests and other legitimate interventions in order to enable harassment campaigns, violent hate speech, cybercriminality, basically anything that anyone would want to do that a normal web host would spurn and wouldn't want to be involved in. They have a tendency to change IP space and ASNs in order to evade defenders blocking their service and content. And they provide a safe haven for everything from phishing sites to malware payloads to command and control servers and more. In addition to hosting, they employ significantly higher level privacy for their users. So investigations can often dead end at a bulletproof host.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So
and they do a lot of that stuff. Like they really cutely present it as reliability and high uptime and guaranteed uptime, that kind of thing. They make it sound like they're just being a great hosting provider with reliable service.
It's just business, right?
Yeah.
The way you described it, Ian, it sounds like they're trying to be like the cool mom. It's you can do whatever you want here. We're going to ignore everything else.
They're the cool mom if you also give mom some of your share of illicit goods for enabling the.
I don't want to be part of that family. And Proton66 is a kind of bulletproof hosting, right? And what exactly do we know about that currently?
Proton66 is located in Russia, which is no surprise. A lot of bulletproof hosting companies are out there. The one I was most familiar with hailing from Russia was Prospero. And interestingly enough, Intrinsic released a report in 2024 identifying Proton66 as a key player in bulletproof hosting, but also provided substantial links to Prospero. They did this in both behavior as far as the 2 ASNs are concerned, as well as even down to network configuration and other technical observables that seemed to link the 2 networks. Intrinsic also found a large chunk of sock-gaulish infrastructure specifically on Proton66. So they're definitely favored hosts and networks for people that are doing no good.
No good in the neighborhood. So why is Proton66 considered a breeding ground for aspiring hackers and amateur threat actors? Like, or wouldn't it be all bulletproof hosting, or is there something specific to Proton66?
So what our investigators found is that a high degree of content and campaigns from unpolished actors ended up on Proton66 without being taken down, with no action taken. It was a bit of a wild west of varying degrees of skill, but most other hosts are willing to make a token effort to eradicate the low-hanging fruit on their infrastructure in order to provide a pretense of compliance. And Proton66, like Prospero, doesn't bother. So in addition to serious threat actor infrastructure, domains and campaigns set up by fledgling malicious actors, and those latter end up making a lot of mistakes.
Gotcha. And how does this compare to Z servers, which is another bulletproof hosting site that was in the news pretty recently?
Yeah, Z servers hosts higher level actors. In regards to the news, they were just sanctioned in February by multiple countries for their direct connections to Lockbit specifically. Additionally, they were favored by Beyond Leon and Hunters International. Z servers is headquartered in Russia, surprise, And they also appear, this is one of the differentiating factors, they also appear to have infrastructure, significant infrastructure outside of Russia. As part of that, sanctioning and law enforcement action included Dutch authorities seizing 127 servers of theirs in Amsterdam data center after a year-long investigation. Intel 471 actually just released a good article on Z servers in March that we should link in the notes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we can do that. So the group identified using Proton66 is known as Coquettte with 3 T's. And I've said that 3 times now already. What can you tell us about this? Is it a group or is it an individual?
So that's always a question. In this case, what it looks like is it tends more to an individual that also associates with groups. But there's always, unless you go deep into a year-long investigation, there's always going to be ambivalence there and ambiguity. Our investigators rated Coquettte as a newer or more amateur, financially motivated criminal, focused mostly on deploying malware that pretends to be legitimate software, but they also have a sideline in some of the sort of really old school freedom stuff, like posting PDFs of illicit knowledge, like how to make bombs or drugs or things like that. So they're mostly malware based, but they do have a few side interests.
You got to diversify your portfolio anymore. So there's that.
Absolutely. You can't put all your criminal eggs in one basket.
Oh, no. So how did an operational security or OPSEC failure expose Coquette's malicious infrastructure to the domain tools investigators?
Originally, our investigators were looking more broadly at Proton66. In doing so, they stumbled on what looked like a product page for an antivirus software called Cybersecure Pro. In lots of cases, when setting up a website, you want to prevent users from obtaining directory listings from the server or traversing between directories, because that can lead to privileged areas or things that you don't want them to see. So you set up your own navigation hyperlinks and things along those lines, whatever architecture runs the website. Coquettte apparently forgot to do this with the malicious Cybersecure Pro site. So the whole infrastructure was exposed, including the malware dropper. Our investigators are fantastic. I love our team, and they have a diverse set of skills. So it's always fun to see them flex different areas of skill. In this case, branch 1 was OSINT, so just open source intelligence. The second branch was malware analysis, which is always fun and totally above my head for the most part. In particular, malware analysis and OSINT allowed our investigators to connect the first site, the Cybersecure Pro site, to multiple others, including Coquette's personal site and several malware command and control domains that could also be found through registration email pivots. So they were actually parallelizing, our investigators were parallelizing tracks and pivots between different pages on multiple levels. Other pivots revealed connections to a broader group operating under the name Horrid, with some of the same shared infrastructure. And that was further verified by a shared Google Analytics tracker. We employed a number of methods, and frankly, the OPSEC involved could have been a lot better. They gave us a lot to pivot off.
Interesting. So what would be the recommendations from the Domain Tools Investigations team to other practitioners regarding Coquettte and Proton66?
So this is the part where I'm going to sound like an evangelist, because it's why I love this piece so much. In blue teaming, we can very easily get lost in the onslaught of 0 days and the fancy stuff. And in doing so, we lose sight of the fact that most bad actors aren't going to be nation state level experts. Even those experts started somewhere. So learning from investigations like this allows us to refocus on the behavior patterns of lower level actors and pay much more attention to security engineering and posture fundamentals. It's in the fundamentals that we really eliminate the low-hanging fruit. So it's not headline grabbing APTs, but this research, I think, is a lot closer to day-to-day blue teaming than complex exploit chains or generative AI deepfakes.
Gotcha. Okay. And then as we're coming up on the hoodie rating portion of this, I think this is a good time to pull in Tim for his opinion on this. So we just heard Ian speak, which thank you, Ian, for walking us through this. This was fascinating. Tim, what would you say the threat that Proton66 and Coquettte pose from a hoodie perspective?
First, an observation. I've looked at an awful lot of suspicious and known bad domains over the years. And I have to say, the variations on the word secure and security should always be a red flag if you're looking at an unknown domain. Unfortunately, the irony of that is not to be missed, but the word secure occurs in an awful lot of bad domains. So there's a red flag for you. As far as the rating, there are really, I see three ways to look at this. One of them is goodies of the investigation here, which it gets all the goodies. Loved seeing the work, but I'll focus on the badness here. And then I think the way I'm going to respond is to expand out from just Proton66 and the Coquettte group more broadly to bulletproof hosting, as we've been talking about, because bulletproof hosting is a big problem from a security perspective. And for all the reasons that Ian mentioned, their lack of cooperation with law enforcement and the fact that most kinds of malicious activities require some kind of actor-controlled infrastructure. And when these outfits make it easy for actors to stand up that infrastructure and much harder for law enforcement and good guys to do anything about that, makes everybody's lives harder. For bulletproof hosting in general, I'm going to say that's a 6 hoodie problem. And then these are components underneath that.
Gotcha. Okay. Ian, do you feel similarly?
I do in some ways, but I'm actually going to take a different tack than Tim, just so I'm not saying I agree with everything Tim says, because I do. But I want to I'm going to look at it from the behavior point of view, because what our investigators saw was that Coquettte and in particular that shared group that goes under the name Horrid was actually an incubator. It incubates folks looking to get into cybercrime. Proton66 provides them the launching pads, and Horrid provides them the social and shared technical means to do. And whenever you take someone who has that curiosity, has some of those low-level technical capabilities, but also can find some kind of fellowship in a group, that's all going to mix together and be much, much more effective in terms of raising people up from low-level actors to much higher level and more dangerous actors. So I think it's behavior that's well worth looking at. And I'm going to agree with Tim on the score for this as well. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ian, for walking us through the domain tools investigations piece. Thank you, Tim, for walking us through Infoblox's piece. That's also good industry news to share, pass around for collaboration within our group. We reached the last portion of the show, though, which is we're going to talk about our goals and our guidances, minus the grievances, because if you're a newer listener, we used to talk about our grievances as well, but then we decided it's just too much of a bummer, no matter where you put it, first, last, it's just, there's a lot of negativity. So we're just going to focus on the gold and the guidance. And like the name suggests, we're going to share something good, and we're going to share some tips or tricks to hopefully help you out. And that could be an info set, could be other areas of life. Depends on where you guys take us. So
the possibilities are endless.
No. Tim, do you want to start?
I feel like we need an all grievance episode at some point. Maybe around Festivus.
Nothing but grievances.
It's like the Duke standing at the end of Romeo and Juliet shouting that everyone's being punished now, that all are punishing. Yeah, I think we need an all grievance episode.
I think around Festivus time is obviously the natural time for that. Boy, I think by December of 2025, we will have accumulated more than one show's worth of grievances, and picking out the top 10 or whatever it's going to be that's going to be a doozy.
We can definitely make that happen. I look forward to a Festivus version of the show. But for now, Tim, would you like to share your gold and your guidances?
There's Callie keeping us on track as always. Very good. Yeah. So let's see. So my guidance is, because of without getting too political about anything, the uncertainty around a lot of our governmental structures right now. I heard a piece of advice that I took and that I am passing along now to other people, which is, this is applicable for our American listeners, sorry for our non-American listeners, but I think it's still worth passing along. You can log into your account, your Social Security account in the federal government, And the advice was to do that and to download a current copy of all of your data. Because if anything should happen to that data, it's going to be helpful to know where things stood as of the snapshot that you take. So that is my recommendation. It's almost a little too painless to be able to get in, which scares me a bit, quite honestly. But you can log in there and you can see the history of your payment and what you've paid into Social Security and so forth, and what your benefits would be at the various retirement ages that you could pick and so forth. So I think this is advice that makes sense and wanted to pass that along. The gold in nerd world, this isn't InfoSec specifically, but a trailer has just dropped for a new Tron movie. And so I am looking forward to maybe seeing what that's going to be all about. The trailer looks interesting, and I'm just a general fan of the Tron franchise. I remember seeing the original one in the theater when I was a kid and was blown away by it. And so looking forward to that. I think the movie doesn't come out till the fall sometime, but they drop these trailers pretty early now. So anyway, hope to see what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds cool. Awesome. All right, Ian, what about you? Golden guidance, no grievances.
I actually like Tim's a lot, talking about retirement and looking forward to it, because I didn't realize we were a science fiction podcast at this point.
We've been many kinds of podcasts over the years, Ian.
It's such an uplifting vision of the future. I love it, and I hope it actually happens. All right, so my goals for this week is going to be I'm going to stick to industry shilling, and it's going to be for SpyCloud. They've put out some great technical content lately. A couple weeks ago, they had an article laying out a bunch of phishing page analysis, which was just a fantastic run through. This week, they've put out their identity threat landscape report, which is always good reading. And SpyCloud, I've seen some of their investigational work, and it is just amazing between the data that they have and the people that they have working with it. So my goal is definitely for SpyCloud this week. My guidance is going to be, it's basically right in the middle, or actually almost approaching the end of CFP season. The Black Hat CFP just closed. The DEF CON CFP closes soon. There are a bunch of others going on. Always look out for conferences and things like that, because I love B-sides. But yeah, it's basically prime CFP season. So make sure you check those conferences that you like and get those submissions in.
Diana Initiative closes May 19th. I've got that one on the brain.
Nice. They're good people.
Nice. Yep.
Did either of you apply for any CFPs? Can we talk about that, or no? Is it secret sauce?
We can talk about it. I haven't this year so far, actually. I've been too caught up in other things.
Fair enough.
I've got a couple collaborative ones out there in the pot, and we'll see what happens if any of those get picked up. But it should be interesting.
Yeah. Cool. We'll keep an eye on that. And I will keep an eye on mine as well. So that'll be good. Awesome.
Yeah.
We've reached the end of the episode, which is always a little bit melancholy, but I've enjoyed chatting with you both today. Wonderful insights.
Likewise.
Yeah. It's always great.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. Of course, thank you to our listeners. You're the reason we keep doing this week after week. We hope that you're finding this to be helpful. Again, Alan Lisko was the one that suggested an article that we cover. If you're feeling like you want to participate more, we're on all the socials, so please let us know if there's something that's intriguing that you'd like to talk about on the podcast. We'd love to talk about it, or if you'd like to be a guest, we'd like to have you as well. But
and please, we can't play Freebird on the podcast, but come hang out with us at one of our events and we'll totally listen to it with you.
Yeah, we will. All right. Thank you so much, Tim and Ian. This has been great. Thank you to our listeners, and we hope that you'll join us again next week for another all-new episode of Breaking Badness. Thanks, everybody.
That's about all we have for this week. You can find us on Twitter @DomainTools. All of the articles mentioned today will be included in our blog post, which can be found at blog.domaintools.com. Catch us every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time when we publish our podcast and blog. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week on another episode of Breaking Badness. Until then, remember, don't drink and click.